Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pio D'Emilia. I'm seeing today this very timely press conference at the Foreign Correspondent Club of Japan regarding the issue of residents' re-entry in Japan. I mean, the ban for foreigners to re-enter Japan once they leave. As you all know, this is an issue that has been hanging around for many months now. Individuals, businessmen, all foreigners involved, including tourists, of course, but especially residents, are very much concerned about this issue. Some countries have decided eventually to react, like Germany, who has announced that until Japan releases some of these restrictions, Japanese citizens won't be able to enter Germany. Other countries are considering equal reciprocal reaction, but still today, if any foreign resident in Japan, regardless of his permanent visa status, long-term visa status, or working visa, cannot re-enter Japan unless he provides enough documentation to use the so-called humanitarian clause. On the news a couple of days ago, there was a young French lady that asked to go to the funeral of his father, but she was refused the re-entry even in that case. So we are really at a stage that it's very hard to understand the position of the Japanese government. Foreign Minister Motegi yesterday gave a very controversial press conference reiterating the Japanese position. And today we have two important guests. The president, the chairman of the European Business Council of Japan, Michel Mroczek, I'm sorry, yeah, right, okay, that has already come once here at the club, and Christopher LaFleur, who is the chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce in Japan. Of course, they speak on behalf of the business community. And without any more ado, I will give the microphone to Michel first. Please, let's hear from him, then we give the questions to the floor. And also you can ask questions by sending email at the Foreign Correspondent Club. I don't see the, maybe, can you, is it possible to put it on the screen, the email? I don't see it here. Anyway, please go on.
Pio, thank you very much for inviting me again, actually, to speak on this, as you said, important matter. And I'm even more honored to be here, although virtually, with Chris LaFleur, the chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce. This is also showing that the situation here is of concern for the American business community, but also for the European business community in the same way. What I would like to do since last time that I have been here was exactly 1 month ago, I think on June 22nd, I would like to give you an update relating some issues from our side, from the side of the European business community. I would like to talk first about a survey that the EBC has conducted with the great help of the national European chambers of commerce, in particular the German Chamber of Commerce. You may remember last time I have shared with you the findings of the German Chamber of Commerce. And then I would like to address a couple of examples of European leaders or European companies in which way they are impacted by the strict travel ban as imposed by Japan. Finally, also, I would like to express some legal concerns regarding this strict measures. So, starting with the survey, and I was advised that I have only 10 minutes to talk. Starting with the survey from June 30th to June 12th, the European Business Council has reached out to European and Japanese companies based here in Japan. If I say Japanese companies, that means Japanese companies dealing also with trade with Europe. And we had 376 respondents, and the findings were quite interesting. So I will give you three figures. 85% of the respondents were directly impacted by the travel ban. So being positive, we can still say 15% were not. 44% of the companies that provide us with answers had suffered some financial losses with respect to the travel ban. And finally, 23% of the respondents are expecting from the Japanese government some sort of remuneration, be it in form for tax relaxation or direct compensation relating to the losses suffered by the travel ban. So these are the results of the survey. This is not something that I made up, or this is not something that the EBC has suggested to the respondents. To give you a better understanding of the companies that have answered the survey, we had most companies were coming or were based, headquartered in Austria, France, and Germany. Austria, 81 companies, France, 80 companies, Germany, 109 companies. 19% of the companies are large companies, are companies with over 1,000 employees. 56% are small to mid-sized companies with employees between 1 and 100. As for the industry sectors, 30% coming from trade, 38% coming from services, and importantly, 22% coming from manufacturing. Then I said before, 85% were directly impacted by or burdened by the travel ban. Of this 85%, of the 100%, 30% were moderately burdened, 40% heavily, and 15% very, very heavily burdened. So that's an overview about the survey. You will find the survey if you want to see some more details on the website of the EBC. In view of the time concerns, I would like to go to the next issue and address a couple of examples that have raised also the EBC's concerns. We have companies that have work to perform in Japan, that are waiting for expertised workers coming from Europe, and they are not coming, they are not allowed to come, and the projects that are related to that are basically on hold, cannot progress, cannot be developed. We have cases where the top leadership is basically excluded from coming back to Japan, companies that do not have the leadership here because of the circumstances. European engineers cannot visit Japan to inspect projects in order to be part of tender offers made by Japanese. Finally, we have also companies very much concerned regarding the limited competition with their Japanese counterparts. We have companies saying, we, as foreigners, we cannot travel abroad, whereas companies in the same sector can travel abroad, visit their customers, visit their business partners, and do and perform better than we can. We are losing market shares. And finally, just to stay in the time frame, we have been also approached by a couple of European companies expressing concerns regarding not being able to handle their investments in Japan. And as a lawyer, I have looked into some treaties. Of course, the Swiss-Japan Free Trade Agreement is closest to my heart, and it has, as opposed to the EU-Japan EPA, investment protection chapter. And looking at the provisions, I see that the foreign companies may have a good point, and I'm very concerned, we are concerned at the EBC that this situation may also trigger some investment disputes against Japan. So far, Japan has never been on the respondent side in investment dispute, according to my knowledge. That's a short update from the European side. Now, I think I will pass the word to Chris.
Yes, thank you, Michael. And let me now introduce the president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Japan. Welcome to FCCJ, even if from remote. And please, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I want to, excuse me, express appreciation for this opportunity to talk to the members of the foreign press community here in Japan. Excuse me, to address this very important issue. I think it's important to start off by expressing some recognition of the situation with respect to the pandemic here in Japan, and appreciation for what the Japanese government has been able to accomplish in terms of checking the spread of the infection so far. I think all of us in Japan owe the Japanese government, its authorities, its healthcare workers, a tremendous debt of appreciation for what they've been able to accomplish. Because compared to the countries that our businesses are largely headquartered in, Japan has been uniquely successful so far in containing the virus. And as we discuss with our Japanese friends and colleagues what might be done to further improve the situation in Japan, we all need to continue to be mindful that first and foremost, the health and safety of everyone involved is the most important objective here. With respect to travel, we at the ACCJ have been very concerned about the way Japan has implemented its policy on several levels. As I think most of you will be aware, those who have been living and working in Japan up until April 2nd were able to depart Japan with the possibility of being able to return. But those who've remained since April 2nd have been unable to do that. And so that poses a serious impediment for many of our members and their families for their lives in Japan, and certainly for their conduct of business in Japan. And this is a policy that is applied only to foreign residents of Japan. So a Japanese national person in principle is free to depart Japan and return to Japan following, of course, the standard quarantining and testing protocols. And in the case of the United States, for example, a Japanese person could, in principle, again, fly to the United States and then return without issue. And that is not an opportunity that is currently afforded to long-term foreign residents of Japan. And from our reading of the literature and understanding of the science, there really is no science base or scientific basis for that policy. And so our first request to the Japanese government has been that the policy be revised to permit foreign residents, long-term residents who are here on long-term visas to do business or study or what have you, to be able to travel in the same way that a Japanese national is able to travel. Now, we appreciate that Japanese government policy involves extensive testing on arrival. And we understand that one of the key constraints that the Japanese government is working with is the number of tests that they're able to perform at ports of entry. Again, since safety is the foremost concern for everyone, I think, in this situation, we need to be able to work within the constraints that Japan has. Nevertheless, if there are numbers constraints, then surely some way could be found to apportion numbers in such a way that foreign residents of Japan would also be able to travel. Now, going beyond those who are resident currently in Japan, there's the broader issue, which Michael has been discussing extensively from the European perspective on business travel to and from Japan. And in that area, of course, we're looking at some very difficult decisions we understand the Japanese government faces. For those in Europe, where they find themselves at this point in the waves of the pandemic is somewhat different from where the United States is at this point. And so again, we appreciate the need for care and caution as Japan looks at this. Nevertheless, it's clear that the current restrictions are currently having and will have increasing impact on Japan's effort to further grow its economy and overcome the tremendous shock that the pandemic has created economically for Japan. And so business people from global companies who are unable to travel overseas to work with colleagues, to attend meetings, are increasingly going to have difficulty running their businesses here. We have a number of members who are currently unable to return to Japan to run their businesses because they've been caught outside the country. We have other cases in which executives are due to depart and their replacements cannot be brought into the country. In other cases, we have technical personnel who ought to be in country to ensure that our businesses can operate as effectively as possible. Those sorts of technical personnel cannot be brought into the country. So in a variety of areas, this travel situation is going to impose increasing costs on the Japanese economy. So we think it's important that we, the foreign business community and the Japanese government and business community be working together to address what is going to become, as I said, an increasingly serious issue for the Japanese economy. Now, we understand the Japanese government is looking at ways it can restart business travel with certain countries where they believe the virus is under reasonable control. We've all seen reports about some of those countries. And our request to the Japanese government in this respect is that as travel for business reasons becomes possible under Japanese policy with other countries, that opportunity be accorded equally to the foreign business community going both ways. That's going to be important for many of us, particularly those who are part of organizations that have regional bases in other parts of Asia. You can see that becoming an issue very soon as Japan begins to reopen with other countries in the region. And as those travel bans are eased with other countries in the future, we think it's going to be important that the foreign business community be able to help Japan maintain its global connections, its global business posture by participating fully in those programs. So let me end my remarks there, and I look forward to responding to any questions.
Thank you very much, Christopher. I already have a question from a member remote, Ilgin Yorulmaz from BBC World Service Turkish, which connects very well to what you just said. Probably the best solution, the one that we all hope for, is that Japan, as other countries, produces a system by which you arrive at the airport, you have your test, you wait for the results, and then you proceed whether for quarantine or just fiduciary isolation. And yesterday, Health Minister Kato Katsunobu hinted at the fact that in view of easing of the rules, Japan is going to arrange for 10,000 tests. 10,000 tests. But it will take until September, he said. Providing that until now, I believe we have a capacity of around 2,500 tests a day. Do you think this is a credible possibility? You think that Japan is really able to produce a capacity of 10,000 tests and that this will lead to an easing of these procedures? I think both of you, Michael first or Christopher.
Should I start? So I understand that this is possible. 10,000 tests. Probably we have been reading about enlarging the capacity of testing at the airports here in Japan. I would not question this measure. I think that the Japanese government could go even farther. It could go farther by cooperating more with for us relevant or for me relevant European governments and take advantage possibly of the fact that some of the European countries have already testing capacities at the airports.
Yes.
So I think connecting to that,
like Korea.
Like
Korea
now, I am also aware of Germany having testing capacities on the major airports. So there are measures. We can increase the capacity of testing by cooperating with other countries, I believe, and make sure that people arriving in Japan are basically negative.
Christopher?
Yes, I agree with that. We've certainly seen in other countries that testing in the high thousands, if not more, on a daily basis is possible in many of our countries. And I think Japan could also avail itself of perhaps a broader range of technologies, perhaps including from foreign companies that are available on the market. Now, the question is, of course, availability and the ability of Japanese labs on site to process those in real time, et cetera. There are obviously some logistical questions that would need to be resolved, but clearly other countries have been able to do it. So we would expect that Japan would have the capacity to do that, and we hope they will in short order.
Okay, let's now open the floor. Richard?
Thank you. Richard Lloyd Parry of The Times. A couple of questions. One is, do you have a sense of the comparative picture worldwide on policies like this? I mean, we've been told that United States Japanese can come and go in a way that foreigners here can't. But I know, for example, that my colleague in Moscow is in the same position as me. If he leaves Russia, he can't go back in. I mean, overall, among the large, rich, advanced democracies, how much of an outlier is Japan on this? Or are there other governments that are taking a similar position? That was the first question. The second was, I don't know if you can answer this, but do you have a clear sense of the motivation for this political decision? I mean, do you take it at face value that this is simply a decision made by the government purely in the interest of public health? Or are there, as there sometimes are, hidden political urges behind this? I suppose one way of putting it is, what's the honne behind this matter? And a third question, if I may, which is what can foreign correspondents do to help with this pressure on the Japanese government? I mean, there are many of us, including me, who are regional correspondents, and we can't do our jobs either if we can't travel outside Japan. It's harder to measure that in financial terms, but it does make a difference. And there are various organizations, committees of journalists, the FCCJ and associated with it. And we've talked a little about this and what we might do. Most of the work we do is connected with freedom of the press and access. And this doesn't fall obviously under that rubric. But what, if anything, could we do to help?
Michael?
Should I take it?
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I can't speak on behalf of all the countries. I can, but I will be happy to limit myself to Europe. So Europe has opened up as of 1st of July, as far as I know. So basically, travelers from Japan can travel to Europe. There is one exception, which is Germany requesting from some of the countries. There are 15 countries to which Europe has opened. Germany is requesting reciprocity from 3 of those countries, as far as I know. So we have, this is the situation in Europe. I'm not aware about every single other country in the world, but I'm here to speak on behalf of Europe. To go to the second question, what is the real thing behind? That's what we are all asking ourselves, I believe. What is the real reason? And just to share with you my thoughts is, you know, I had a lunch just 2 days ago with a friend, Japanese, who was born in Switzerland, and he grew up in Switzerland working for a large Japanese company here in Japan. And basically, he can go to Switzerland whenever he wants. He can go to Switzerland whenever he wants. He can travel to other countries. Now, I have a Japanese wife. I have 2 kids with Japanese citizenship, and my kids are asking about that too. They are saying like, so Papa, why are you treated in a different way than the Japanese? I don't know what to say to them. I don't know what to say to them. We are living here. We are working here. We are paying taxes here. We are enjoying the system. We are enjoying life in Japan. But what's the true reason behind it? I do not know. And something that caught my attention is the International Covenant on the Civil Rights that basically says in Article 12, Paragraph 4, it says no one shall arbitrarily be deprived of the right to enter his own country. And this caught my attention, and I put some more effort to that. The interpretation of that, according to the Committee of Human Rights, is that the own country is not only limited to the country of nationality.
Exactly.
It goes much farther than that. And I can quote from the comments of the Committee of the Human Rights Committee. It says the wording of Article 12, Paragraph 4, does not distinguish between nationals and aliens. Thus, the persons entitled to exercise this right can be identified only by interpreting the meaning of the phrase his own country. The scope of his own country is broader than the concept of country of his nationality. So this is clear in this regard.
So in this sense, Japan is your own country.
In this sense, I would call Japan my own country. And this is how my kids see me too. They say, Papa, this is your own country.
Well, if I may add, even in Japanese constitution, it's clearly written that foreigners with regular, permit of staying are totally equipped to the national. The only thing that we cannot vote. But for the rest, any other discrimination is legal, in my opinion. Anyway, Christopher, you want to add up something?
Well, with respect to the U.S., permanent residents of the United States, under my understanding, with the exception of a few places designated in the world, such as certain parts of China, are free to return, to travel back and forth to and from the United States. And therefore, in that sense, a Japanese national who held that status would be able to travel back and forth to the United States. Now, the situation has gotten a little more complicated, as I understand it, because President Trump has decided to restrict the travel to the United States of certain business visa holders. And so I'm afraid that it would depend on the particular case. But in general, relative to the United States, Japan clearly imposes a higher level of restriction on travel by foreign nationals than, again, in principle, the United States does. With respect to the motivations for this, I think all I can add is that there really doesn't appear to be a scientific basis for this policy. And as I mentioned a moment ago, there does seem to be some concern about Japan's ability to manage numbers. But in that respect, with some fairly modest changes to the way the system is being implemented, surely foreign nationals could be treated the same way as Japanese with respect to travel. And we certainly hope those modifications can be made quickly. Thank you.
I think the third question was addressed to you. What can the Foreign Correspondent Club do?
No.
Oh.
He knows very well what is my opinion on that.
I ask it because
Yes.
it seems clear that between you, you've done a certain amount of lobbying, and that there is an effort in train by organisations like yours. Perhaps the answer is no, not really, but the question is what, if anything, could organisations of foreign correspondents or individuals do?
The Foreign Correspondents Club has done a lot, and we as a European Business Council appreciate the efforts. We have the impression that the foreign media has been discussing this issue extensively. We see that foreign media we read about this issue almost every day. We don't think that the Japanese media writes enough about this. So answering this question, maybe I'll be very happy to see more Japanese media in the room.
Sorry, could I just be clear on the question of Europe? Is it the case that Japanese residents of Europe, with all the papers looking to paying their taxes and so on, could leave anywhere in Europe and return?
Yes.
Can leave anywhere in Europe and even to Japan and return freely, yes.
To their residents?
Yes.
That's right. That's right. So basically, Europe is treating the residents of Europe in the same way as it's treating their nationals, not distinguishing between the nationality and residence.
Just to clarify, when Europe decided this on July 1st, they still left to the single governments the possibility of enlarging or restricting further these procedures. For example, Italy imposes a quarantine of 14 days. It's the only country in Europe that imposes to the Japanese 14 days, but that is left to the single governments, even now. Okay, and
Andy Sharp from the Nikkei Asian Review. Just a short question to both of you. First of all, Mikhail, you say you've been lobbying the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Japan. Could you give us details of their response to your lobbying? And the same question to Christopher. What kind of lobbying have you made to the Foreign Ministry here, and what have they said back to you? Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. My answer will be very, very short. Actually, I'm afraid I'm not supposed to share the information about that meeting regarding the travel ban. I'm very sorry for that.
Christopher?
Yes, well, we haven't been in touch with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of International Trade and Industry, and with the Minister of Justice. We've had conversations with officials within their agencies, and we'll continue to do that. Like Michael, I'm not really at liberty to share the contents, but I think you can tell from some of our comments the nature of the responses we've received so far. We intend to continue to have a dialogue with the Japanese government. My sense is they do want to try to find some way to work with us, but nevertheless, so far they haven't seen their way clear to following some of the recommendations that we've made.
Okay, I have a question from our member, Washington Post correspondent Simon Denier. Do you think this will cause, this situation will cause long-term damage to Japan's image as a global regional hub for investors and business? Will it put people off from investing in Japan even when the virus has gone because foreigners feel unfairly treated? Maybe Christopher, you can start.
Certainly. Without question, this is an element that businesses are going to have to take under consideration as they're looking for where they're going to be investing or increasing personnel for their businesses in certainly at the very least the short term. Right now, you wouldn't be thinking about it at all. And I think it comes at a particularly awkward time as Japan is talking about how it can strengthen its appeal as a regional and global financial center. Really quite unfortunate timing from that point of view. Longer term, of course, there are a lot of factors that are going to go into a decision about where you locate your regional headquarters. But again, this is a factor that businesses are really going to have to think very seriously about, particularly because the pandemic has demonstrated more clearly that this sort of health crisis is something that all businesses must raise on the priority list for their business continuity plans. And so if you're sitting down to figure out what that plan has to look like for Asia or on a global basis, and you take this into consideration for Japan, then you're going to have to seriously look to countries where perhaps the policy has been more even-handed with respect to both domestic and foreign nationals.
Michael, you want to comment on this?
I definitely agree with Chris's opinion. It will have an impact, certainly. And what I can add to what Chris just said is that I have been in touch with a couple of companies and directly with the CEOs, telling that they may rethink their policy regarding Japan, and some others adding that how the travel ban was handled creates a sort of unpredictability for the business, and is a certain risk to be considered also for the future.
If I may, Christopher, I think you didn't answer to the third question of Richard before about what do you think is behind all this? I mean, it's just a policy concerning the health, or is there anything behind the scenes or some misconception, some even mistake? Because, you know, we all know that Japanese people sometimes make decisions, they realize they are wrong, but then probably they take time to reverse.
Well, it's hard to shall we say, mind read from afar here. As I noted, there doesn't appear to be a rational scientific basis for maintaining this policy. Now, understanding that the Japanese government feels its testing ability is limited, clearly that's an element as they think about the numbers they have to deal with. It's not surprising, perhaps, that they might put Japanese nationals ahead of foreign nationals in the priority on that. But again, ultimately, I think that comes back to hurt Japan. And that's why a more equitable policy, we think, would be in Japan's interest as well as in the interest of the foreign community here in Japan. Beyond that, I think one can easily imagine Japanese officials being concerned about their ability to understand clearly where foreigners have been when they return to Japan, whether they've been to difficult areas, et cetera, the follow-up in terms of quarantine, et cetera, et cetera. We've all read about cases where in some other countries where quarantine regulations haven't been followed faithfully by travelers, including here in Japan. So I think that concern is understandable, and yet certainly it is a concern that should be manageable. And given the stakes that Japan has in maintaining a strong business connection with their global economic partners, we think it's in Japan's interest to resolve this problem quickly.
Thank you. Okay.
Hello, my name is Etienne Balmer. I'm a journalist of the French press agency. I had also 2 or 3 questions, 2.5, if I may. Do you have any idea of the amount of the financial losses so far from your members, or at least unrealized gains linked to this travel ban? And secondly, did your organization, both of your organization or members of your organization, consider to raise this case to the Japanese justice, like as a legal claim? Or are you still, I understand that you are still pursuing, trying to have a dialogue with the Japanese authorities, but what would be the time or a moment that, you would consider seriously this, to raise this case in front of justice? Thank you.
Should I go ahead?
Yes.
All right. So, thank you. Regarding the financial losses, providing any number is very difficult. It's very difficult, probably even to estimate the losses at this point. So we do not have any numbers. That was also not part of the survey, and as I said, it's probably very difficult for the companies to provide clear numbers at this point. As for legal actions, we EBC, we don't have the mandate to do that. It might be at the discretion of every company that is impacted to proceed in court. As I mentioned before, I know that some companies are considering possibly investment disputes. Investment disputes typically would not be brought to the Japanese courts, but rather solved by international arbitration. And this has been already raised as a topic. Yes.
Chris,
Well,
one by one. So, okay, Christopher.
Let me just add that I'm not a lawyer, and I wouldn't presume to evaluate the legal potential for a case here, but this is really a sovereign decision by Japan that has a basis in its public health policy. And I don't think you're going to be very successful in any country in challenging that sort of sovereign decision in a court of law, whether it's in Japan or elsewhere. So I don't think that's a very productive avenue to be pursuing. I think what we need to do is work with the Japanese government to find ways to demonstrate to them that this can be done safely and that it's in Japan's interest to do it this way. And I think if we do that, we will find eventually that we're successful. With respect to losses, the American Chamber of Commerce spans a very wide gamut of companies, everywhere from Fortune 500 global enterprises down to one-man startups. And so we don't have a specific figure on losses that we can estimate at this point. But I think actually, if you would look at the overall loss in the Japanese economy, you could project that percentage pretty much directly onto to our organization and our membership, and probably come pretty close to an accurate figure.
All right. The lady.
Karine Nishimura, working for French newspaper Libération and the French radio station Radio France. I have two questions. I know that a lot of foreign embassies are dealing with a lot of humanitarian, so-called humanitarian cases, but do you have personally or among your members to deal with called humanitarian cases you see as humanitarian, but that in fact has not been allowed to go abroad and to come back? That's the first question. And the second question, I asked yesterday to the foreign minister if they will give a kind of priority to residents who are stuck abroad now. And the answer is that it seems that they don't intend to do that. They will reopen country by country very progressively and give priority to business. It means that some businessmen who are not resident in Japan can be allowed to come back before some resident now abroad, but who have no business activities in Japan. I mean, for example, a mother who go abroad with the kids to help the kids to enter university in Europe, who are not allowed to come back now. In this case, what would be your reaction? Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Should I start again?
Of course, yes.
As the EBC, we do not deal with humanitarian cases, so we do not approach directly the ministries and ask them to or support any sort of applications for re-entrance to Japan. As the EBC is a chamber of the European National Chambers of Commerce, so we mainly support the businesses on the lobbying side. So this to the first question, and no, although I'm aware myself of a couple of cases, definitely. As for giving priority to businesses stated by the foreign minister, that's probably going a little bit into the same direction as the first question. We, of course, personally, I think we should, well, allow me to start differently. I think, as I said the last time at the press conference here, we as a European business, we would appreciate, we will be in favor of a three-step approach. So at first, Japan should reopen for long-term or permanent residents here in Japan, giving them the same rights, as I mentioned before, as Japanese nationals. There is no reason, as we heard so far that we are aware of, to treat permanent residents or long-term residents differently. The second step, we would like to see reopening towards business. And we think that, of course, the wave can be large. And we know that Japan has contained the spread of the virus in a very good way. I fully agree with Chris's words at the very beginning. We have high respect for what the Japanese government has done. We see regarding the second step that it might be a good solution to have numbers per day of people that Japan may want to let into the country, to have some restrictions, to look at cases on the case-by-case basis, opening borders and without any control of the numbers of foreigners coming in may actually be against this, or actually may destroy this beautiful numbers that Japan can so far show. So to answer your questions, I think it should be actually regarded as case by case matter.
With respect to the ACCJ,
sorry.
we do, of course, know of cases where application has been made for permission to travel on a humanitarian basis. And we certainly try to assist our members in connecting with the appropriate officials in the Japanese government to pursue those cases as they arise. Sure, like all of you, we're aware of cases in which permission has been granted and other cases in which it has been denied. And our, certainly our hope and expectation is that the number of cases and the basis on which judgments are made will expand as time goes on. And indeed, we've seen, I think, that over the last month or so, the immigration agency's criteria for consideration of humanitarian exceptions has been specified a little bit more clearly. And our understanding is that they're willing to look at cases that go beyond the immediate letter of or specific designations of those humanitarian cases that have been issued in writing. So there clearly is a willingness to consider cases, and I think that's a tentative step that the Japanese government has tried to take to be at least somewhat responsive to the concerns that we're raising today. Nevertheless, the numbers that are being given permission under that rubric are so small that it really doesn't amount to an adequate response to the concerns that we have about foreign nationals in Japan being unable to travel. So we really need to go to an equal basis for consideration for both foreign nationals and Japanese nationals under this policy. Beyond that, I don't think I've got anything further. Michael laid out a step-by-step process here. I think we would largely agree with that. We appreciate the fact that Japan perhaps has a third step in there in terms of its concept of allowing travel to some specific countries where the virus appears to be under control. It seems to be taking some considerable time to work out the arrangements with those countries. We've been hearing about this now for quite a few weeks. And to my knowledge, there have been very few flights under those rubrics. And so clearly it's going to be some time before we're seeing more general business travel begin here. But as we've both been saying from the beginning here, this is really in Japan's interest from a business point of view and from an economic point of view to reopen business travel as soon as the pandemic allows.
You wanted to another question, Richard? No? I saw you. Okay, John.
Joan Anderson, sorry, Soka Gakkai. I've been in touch before about a particular legal question, but I take it that legal issues are not the way that any of the chambers of commerce or the Business Council is wanting to go forward. But I wonder, in view of this perceived kind of concern on from the Japanese perspective of sort of hundreds and thousands of people all wanting to come in at once and that not being manageable, is there any possibility of offering to kind of jointly handle these issues of testing and quarantine, even, for people coming back in and trying to come to, say, different countries having maybe quotas, maybe limits, but sort of offering assistance to deal with that? In, I guess the only example that comes to mind for me is a sort of Eurostar model between the UK and other countries in Europe, where there's a joint handling of certain issues. Anyway, I just wondered if it's something that's been looked at all.
Thank you. I think, as I mentioned before, what would be one solution is that the testing takes already place at the airport where the person is departing. Also, what we could imagine is to have basically flights, chartered flights where the whole group is screened before getting on the flight to make sure that who is arriving here to Japan is really negative in the sense of the PCR testing. More than that does not come into my mind. Yeah.
Christopher, you want to?
Yeah, I would just add that I think we need to be careful about creating a superstructure around this problem that is going to be tremendously costly and probably impose even more bureaucratic impediments to business travel going forward. Rather than I would imagine that there are governments that are prepared to work with Japan on some sort of mutual effort here to verify testing and that sort of thing. But you have to bear in mind that the nature of testing in this circumstance is such that probably the governments aren't necessarily best placed, certainly at the point of departure, to be managing that. Perhaps the travel industry will be developing solutions along those lines. We've seen reports, of course, in the media that some are considering what could be done in the way of testing in advance of folks getting on flights. And you can imagine that would be perhaps part of the kind of solution you're talking about. And then on the receiving end, it's going to be up to each receiving country fundamentally to test as each country sees fit. Trying to create some bilateral or supranational superstructure around that, I think, is going to be very challenging and potentially create more problems than it solves. What we should be hoping to see is that each country develops at its ports of entry a robust testing system that ensures that folks who are entering their territories are tested, and if assuming they are free of the virus, allowed to conduct their business within the country. And if it turns out that they are infected, that they be quarantined for as long as necessary. And if we can establish those systems in each country, we're probably going to be better off.
Thank you. Well, we are Michael, let me ask you the last question. I was touched a little bit when you articulated your emotion humanly before, saying, I consider this my own country too. I have my kids asking what happens to me, what happens here. When you heard yesterday Foreign Minister Motegi speaking of gaijin, foreigners, again, in such a way, like we are potentially the danger, we are different, we are uncontrollable, and so on. As a long resident, I guess you're a permanent resident, right? Well, anyway, you have a Japanese wife, you have a family here. You consider your country this place along with your original one. Emotionally, what could you tell us? How do you feel? I mean, is it?
Yeah, I'm beyond disappointed. I think in general, Pio, I think this is the fact of tying the travel ban to nationality. It's a systemic mistake. It's a systemic mistake, I think. People are born. I mean, like I said before, they are Japanese born abroad and Japanese, so they can travel. They are foreigners born in Japan. They cannot. Beyond disappointed.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Michael, you are already a honorary member, so I guess you will get just some souvenir. And for Christopher, we have a honorary membership to this club for 1 year that you can pick up at your pleasure whenever you show up here. Okay?
Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you very much to both, and let's hope to meet possibly again to celebrate the end of the ban.
Thank you, Pio, very much.
Here we are.